President.
Senator from Texas.
Mr. President, reserving the right to object, the senator from New Jersey, and indeed all of the senators in this chamber, know precisely why these nominees have not moved forward. And the reason is because the Biden administration is currently engaged in open defiance of the United States Congress and is doing so in a way that is working serious and material harm to United States national security. Over a year ago, in December of 2019, this Senate, and indeed the full Congress, passed legislation imposing strong sanctions on the Nord Stream 2 pipeline. The Nord Stream 2 pipeline is a pipeline between Russia and Germany designed to carry natural gas. It's a deep-sea pipeline. Vladimir Putin desperately wants this pipeline completed. If the pipeline is completed, it will give billions of dollars to Putin to use for malign efforts in Europe and throughout the world. This Congress is overwhelmingly convinced that completing the Nord Stream 2 pipeline is terrible policy. It is bad for the United States, it is bad for Europe, and it is good for Russia and Putin. Accordingly, the Congress passed overwhelmingly bipartisan sanctions legislation that I authored, along with Democratic Senator Jeanne Shaheen, and that legislation proved tremendously successful. How successful was it? When the President signed it into law, if my memory serves correctly, at 7 p.m. on a Thursday, construction on the pipeline halted at 6:45 p.m. on that Thursday. 15 minutes before the sanctions went into law, they ceased building the pipeline. And for a year, the pipeline lay dormant. It lay as a hunk of metal at the bottom of the ocean. Won a bipartisan national security victory for the United States. Then in November of last year, Joe Biden was elected. When Joe Biden was elected, President Biden and his foreign policy team immediately began signaling weakness on Nord Stream 2 to Putin. And that signal was heard. Putin commenced preparatory efforts to begin building the pipeline again within days of the presidential election in November, and Russia began building the pipeline again in January, just days after Joe Biden was sworn in. Existing laws that this body has passed, not once but twice, mandate sanctions to stop the Nord Stream 2 pipeline. Unfortunately, the Biden administration decided to waive those sanctions. Waiving those sanctions, I believe, will prove to be a generational geopolitical mistake. If we continue on the current pace set out by President Biden, Putin will complete the Nord Stream 2 pipeline. If that happens, for decades, Putin and the next dictator in Russia and the next dictator in Russia will get billions of dollars every year from this pipeline. They will use it for military aggression. They will use it for spying on America. They will use it for attacking their enemies. Not only that, Europe will be captive to Russian natural gas. It will be subject to energy blackmail. We don't have to hypothesize this because Putin's demonstrated his willingness to use energy blackmail on Europe going forward. This undermines the interest of Europe. It undermines the interest of America. And by the way, it also hurts jobs in the United States of America. I've made clear to every State Department official, to every State Department nominee, that I will place holds on these nominees unless and until the Biden administration follows the law and stops this pipeline, imposes the sanctions. As the senator from New Jersey knows well, and he and I work together closely on these sanctions legislation that the Biden administration is refusing to follow, I have been negotiating with the Biden administration in good faith for months, laying out a path to move these nominees forward. But unfortunately, to date, President Biden has insisted on giving a multi-billion-dollar gift to Joe Biden, benefiting Russia, hurting America, and hurting our national security interests. That being said, there is a path where I would readily lift these holds. And it is a path I am in a moment going to propound a unanimous consent resolution, a unanimous consent request, to take up and pass legislation that I've introduced that would impose the sanctions that are already required by law, but the Biden administration refuses to follow. This legislation is legislation that both of the Democratic members of the Foreign Relations Committee have voted for substantially similar legislation in the past. If this legislation passes the Senate, if it passes the House and is signed by the President, the day it is signed by the President, I will lift these holds. But given that the President and White House have indicated they intend to defy the law, I'm not going to lift the holds unless and until they relent in their effort to give this gift to Vladimir Putin. Accordingly, I ask unanimous consent that the Senate proceed to the immediate consideration of a bill at the desk that would require the imposition of sanctions with respect to Nord Stream 2. I ask unanimous consent that the bill be considered read a third time and passed, and that the motion to reconsider be considered made and laid upon the table.
Mr. President.